You know how it is, you think you know someone, or at least you think you know their story.
Right.
You get these figures from history or religion, even more so maybe, that are just kind of reduced down to this one, I don't know, one defining thing,
Yeah.
like the ultimate good or the ultimate bad. And today, we are diving deep into one of those figures. You know him, Judas Iscariot.
Yeah. The name Judas, it's almost synonymous with betrayal, right?
Totally.
But the interesting thing is, if you actually go back to the source material, the story is way more complicated than that. It's so much more interesting. It's really been debated and changed over the centuries.
Right. It's not just a simple black and white story, is it?
Yeah.
We've been looking at this research paper, and it goes into all of it, from the canonical gospels to some really obscure apocryphal texts, medieval legends, even that Gospel of Barnabas, which I know we're going to talk about later.
Oh, yeah, we've got to get to that.
But the point is, this paper looks at it all.
It really does. And it's fascinating how Judas has been interpreted in all these different ways in different time periods. So that's what we're going to dig into today. See if we can trace those changes and maybe, I don't know, maybe see some unexpected things along the way.
I think we will. I think we will. Okay, so where do we start? Well, I guess the beginning is the beginning with the canonical gospels. What do they tell us about Judas?
Well, right away, the most obvious thing is that from the get-go, he's presented in a very consistent way. His betrayal, it's almost like it's part of who he is right from the start.
Yeah, okay.
So if you look at Matthew, Mark, and Luke, he's pretty much always last in the list of the 12 disciples.
Okay.
And really importantly, he's always called out as the one who betrayed him.
Mm.
John's gospel goes even further. It straight up calls Judas a thief.
Mm.
It says that he was stealing money that belonged to the disciples. And get this, it even says that Jesus said that one of them was a devil.
Whoa, okay, so yeah, right out of the gate, Judas is condemned, painted as the bad guy. But then there's this one line that Jesus says to him. I always find it so strange. Friend, what you do, do quickly. What's that about?
I know. It's like so loaded, isn't it?
Yes.
There are some scholars who think it means that Jesus knew this was going to happen, that it was fate,
Ah,
and that maybe he even accepted Judas's role in it all,
interesting.
regardless of why Judas was actually doing it. But that paper we were talking about, it also makes this point. Despite the fact that Judas is so infamous, he's really not mentioned that many times in the Gospels and Acts, only 18 times total. And yet, that's been enough for him to become this ultimate symbol of betrayal.
It's amazing, isn't it? Just those few mentions, and they've shaped how we see him for centuries.
It's true. And it's interesting, too, because the paper's author takes this, I don't know, almost a lawyer's approach to the Gospels.
Okay, yeah.
Looking for those inconsistencies, anything that could raise some doubt about the traditional story.
Right, like, reasonable doubt.
Exactly. And it actually throws up some interesting stuff. Like, remember the story about Jesus being anointed with expensive oil?
Yeah.
Matthew, he says all the disciples were angry about the cost.
Right.
But Mark says it was just some of them. Then John goes and specifically names Judas as the one who was objecting to the whole thing, saying it was a waste.
Right, right. So different perspectives, different tellings.
Yeah. Then you've got the agreement to betray Jesus. Like, was it Judas's idea, or was he, I don't know, was he pushed into it? Did someone make him an offer?
Right.
Matthew says Judas went to the priests, he asked them what they'd give him, and they settled on 30 silver coins.
Okay.
But Mark and Luke, they say that the priests were happy and said they'd give him money, and then Judas agreed.
Okay.
Luke actually adds in that Judas then went and looked for a way to betray Jesus. But John, he doesn't even mention money at this point.
Oh, okay.
His gospel focuses on Satan getting into Judas and pushing him to do it. So you see, even with something as important as the betrayal itself, there are different versions of the story. And that, well, it really makes you think about Judas's motives, doesn't it? Was it just about money?
Yeah.
Or was something else going on?
Right, right. Yeah, maybe the gospel writers had different agendas. Or maybe they just saw it differently. I don't know.
Yeah. And then there's the kiss of betrayal.
Oh, yeah, that iconic kiss.
Even that isn't the same across all the Gospels.
Oh, really?
Matthew and Mark, they see Judas went up to Jesus, kissed him, and said, Rabbi. But in Luke, Jesus actually asked Judas, are you betraying the Son of Man with a kiss? Like, he's questioning the whole point of it. And John, he leaves the kiss out altogether.
Really?
He just says that Judas arrived with the soldiers and pointed Jesus out to them.
Huh. So even something as visual, as specific as that, it's not consistent.
It's not. And then you get to the accounts of Judas's death. There, it's like two completely opposite stories.
Yeah, that's true.
Matthew says that he was so full of remorse, after he betrayed Jesus, that he gave back the money and hanged himself.
Right.
But in Acts, it says that Judas used the money to buy a field, and then he fell head first, and his body burst open.
Right.
Oh, that's
Awful.
Yeah. And that's caused a lot of theological debate.
Mm.
Some people try to put the two accounts together. Maybe the hanging rope broke and then he fell.
Okay.
But others, they see the way he died as being really important, especially in terms of what happened to his soul. That paper, it makes this really interesting point.
Yeah.
It says if Judas fell head first, well, then his soul wouldn't have left through the same mouth that kissed Jesus.
Huh. I've never thought of that.
It's interesting, isn't it?
Yeah, it is. So I guess it's all these things, these inconsistencies and contradictions that make the paper's author say there could be reasonable doubt about the whole Judas as the ultimate evil story. And it's kind of wild that, you don't hear about Judas anywhere else in the New Testament.
Mm.
Not in Paul's letters, nothing. And you don't find him in any of the other historical accounts from that time that mention Jesus either, like what Tacitus wrote, or Pliny the Younger, or Josephus.
Right, and that is kind of weird when you think about it. I mean, we can't say for sure that he wasn't real just because he's not mentioned, but it does show that, without the Gospels, we'd basically know nothing about him.
It makes you wonder, doesn't it, if he would have just faded away into history? Okay, so the canonical Gospels, they don't give us the full picture. So let's move on to the apocryphal writings. I always think these are so interesting, like all these extra stories from early Christianity that didn't make it into the Bible. It's where things get really wild.
Oh, absolutely. They're filling in the gaps, and some of them, they take things in very unexpected directions.
Like adding whole new storylines.
Right. Take the infancy Gospel of Thomas, for example.
Oh, yeah.
It tells this story of Jesus as a kid.
Right.
But he's got these, kind of mischievous supernatural powers.
Yeah, he's not exactly a normal kid.
No. And in one of the stories, Judas, he actually hits Jesus in the side, right in the spot where he'll be pierced during the crucifixion later on.
Wow, okay.
It's like they're setting up this conflict between them from the very beginning, like it's destiny or something.
Yeah.
And there are other apocryphal stories, too, that just make Judas look worse and worse. Like there's one where it says that he sold Jesus for 30 gold pieces.
Not silver.
Gold. It
Yep.
seems like a small difference, but it's interesting. And there's even a story about his wife, how she wouldn't believe that Jesus had risen from the dead.
Okay, so in general, these apocryphal gospels, they're not painting Judas in a good light. They're still going with the bad guy narrative.
Yeah, mostly they are. But it is important to remember, not everyone back then saw him as just pure evil.
Oh, right. There were different takes. Right.
There were. Origen, he was this really important theologian, lived in the 2nd and 3rd centuries.
Okay.
He knew about a tradition that said all the apostles betrayed Jesus, not just Judas.
Mm.
He didn't necessarily think that Judas was this inherently bad person.
That's pretty different.
It is. But then you've got someone like Papias, a bishop who was writing around the early 2nd century. He's got this super graphic and honestly really disturbing description of what happened to Judas after the betrayal.
What, like after he died?
Yeah. He says that his body swelled up so much that he couldn't even fit through doorways. And it's pretty gruesome. He says his eyelids were so swollen he couldn't see. And, the details about what happened to his genitals aren't.
Okay, we get it. Pretty awful.
It's rough. And the point is, he's connecting this physical decay, this corruption, with Judas's spiritual state. It's like ultimate demonization.
Yeah. Okay.
But then you've got this other gospel. And this one turns everything on its head.
The Gospel of Judas.
The Gospel of Judas, exactly.
Yeah, this one is a real shocker.
It really is. It's like Judas went from zero to hero. He's not the villain anymore. In fact, he's almost like this trusted friend of Jesus,
Right, like he's in the inner circle.
Exactly. The Gospel of Judas. It goes into all these ideas that were popular with the Gnostics.
Oh, yeah, the Gnostics.
You are all about secret knowledge and spiritual enlightenment.
Right.
And this gospel, it's saying that Judas understood all these mysteries of the kingdom that the other disciples didn't get.
Okay.
And there's even a mention of Barbilla.
Barbella, who's that?
She's this major figure in Gnostic thought. She represents like the first thing that came out of God.
Right, okay.
And it's kind of like that bit in the Gospel of John, in the beginning was the Word.
Oh, I see, yeah.
And get this, in the Gospel of Judas, there are these private conversations between Jesus and Judas where Jesus promises to tell him all these deep secrets.
Wow.
And then there's this line where Jesus says to Judas that he's going to be the 13th and that future generations will curse him.
Okay, that doesn't sound good.
No, but then he also says that Judas will rule over them.
Mm.
And to understand what that means, you have to look at how the Gnostics thought about Jesus.
Okay, yeah.
So for them, it was all about freeing Jesus' spirit from his physical body.
Yeah.
And Jesus actually says to Judas, "You will sacrifice the man that clothes me."
So basically, they're saying Judas wasn't actually betraying Jesus at all.
Right.
He was helping him.
Exactly. He was actually doing what Jesus wanted.
Wow, so Judas was actually a good guy all along.
Well, that's what this gospel is saying anyway. And here's another thing. The Gospel of Judas, it ends with Judas handing Jesus over, but it doesn't say anything about the crucifixion or the resurrection.
Huh?
It's like, in this Gnostic way of thinking, those events just weren't that important.
Yeah, okay, it's a very different way of looking at it, isn't it?
It really is. But of course, the early church, they weren't having any of it.
Right.
Irenaeus, in the late 2nd century, he specifically called out the Gospel of Judas as being full of lies and said it was a Gnostic text.
Right, heresy.
Exactly. So that's a pretty big swing from the ultimate betrayer
Yeah.
to, well, almost the chosen one, depending on who you ask.
It's amazing how many different ways people have seen this story. Okay, let's jump forward a bit into the medieval period. We've got this text called The Vita of Judas. It's part of the Legenda Aurea, which is like a big collection of saints' lives.
The Golden Legend, right?
Yeah. It's kind of funny, isn't it?
That Judas has his own little biography in there.
Yeah, it's like an anti-hagiography or something.
That's a great way to put it. It's not there to show you how to be good. It's more like a warning.
Right.
A story of how someone ends up completely damned.
And the story itself is crazy. It's like they took the story of Oedipus, that Greek tragedy, and mixed it up with the Bible.
Oh, it totally does. Although most people in the Middle Ages probably wouldn't have known the Oedipus story directly. The themes of fate and prophecy, they would have resonated.
Right. So tell me about this Judas. What's his story in this Vita?
Okay, so his mother, Cyboria, she has this dream while she's pregnant with him, and it's a bad one. She dreams that her son is going to grow up and kill his father, then marry his mother, and then betray his savior for 30 pieces of silver.
Yikes. Well, that's specific.
Yeah. Judas's father, Reuben, he tries to brush it off.
Yeah, who wants to believe that?
But Cyboria, she's terrified. So she does something drastic. She puts baby Judas in a barrel and throws him into the sea.
Seriously?
Yeah, like Moses in a way.
Oh, right, right.
And the barrel, it washes up on this island called Iscariot.
Which they're saying is where the name Iscariot comes from.
Exactly. And then the queen of this island, she finds Judas and adopts him because she can't have kids of her own.
Okay, so far so good, I guess.
Yeah, it doesn't last. Judas, as he gets older, he gets jealous of the queen's real son and ends up killing him.
Oh, no.
He runs away, scared, and ends up in Jerusalem. He starts working for Pontius Pilate.
Pilate,
Yeah. And Pilate, he really likes Judas, thinks he's a handsome young man.
Oh.
But then, totally by accident, Judas ends up killing his own father, Reuben, in an argument over some apples.
So he's fulfilled that part of the prophecy.
He has. And then it gets even weirder. Pilate, trying to be helpful, suggests that Judas should marry Reuben's widow,
You mean his own mother?
Cyboria.
That is messed up.
Yeah. So without knowing it, he marries his mother, just like in the prophecy. And it's not until years later, when Cyboria tells him about her dream, all tearful and everything, that he realizes what he's done.
Oh, wow.
He's full of regret and asks for forgiveness.
Yeah.
And eventually, both his mother and Jesus forgive him. He becomes an apostle and even the treasurer for the group.
So there's hope then.
Seems like it. But then the Vita tells us about Judas stealing from the disciples' money.
Ugh.
And he realizes that the expensive oil that was used to anoint Jesus would have been worth 300 pence,
Right.
enough to sell for 30 pieces of silver.
Mm.
And, well, they're directly connecting this to his decision to betray Jesus for that exact amount.
So even though he was forgiven, he was still going to betray Jesus.
Seems like it. And then, the weirdest thing, the Vita just skips over the crucifixion and the betrayal itself.
Like, they're assuming everyone knows the story already.
Exact.
But the way they told Judas's story, it's like they took bits and pieces from all over the place. The abandoned baby, the apple thing, the killing his brother.
Oh, yeah, that's like Cain and Abel.
Right. And the betrayal, then suicide. It's like the story of Ahithophel from the Old Testament. And of course, the whole killing his father and marrying his mother. That's straight out of Oedipus.
It really is. And the paper, it lists all these terrible things Judas does. Killing his brother, stealing, killing his father, incest, betrayal. suicide.
Wow.
Suicide was considered a major sin.
Of course.
And the Vita, it's all about this question of fate versus free will.
Could Judas ever really escape what was supposed to happen to him?
Right. And it's even got that parallel with Jocasta's suicide from the Oedipus story.
Yeah.
You know, and they try to tie it all back to the Gospels, too, by saying Reuben was actually Simon, which was a more common name for Judas's father.
Right.
But the main message you get from the Vita is that no matter what, Judas can't be saved.
He can't escape his destiny.
Yeah. Even after being forgiven, he's still going to end up betraying Jesus. And as you said, the Vita just ends there before the betrayal even happens.
It's a pretty dark story.
It is. And unfortunately, around this time, you start to see this horrible connection between Judas and Jewish people.
Right, like Judas representing all Jews.
Yeah, which led to a lot of persecution and anti-Semitism.
It's terrible.
It is. And another interesting thing, the Vita, it doesn't say anything about Judas being buried. Later on, there are all these stories about him going to hell.
Right, like in Dante's Inferno.
Exactly. He ends up in the ninth circle, the worst one.
So no redemption for Judas.
Well, there are some stories that say he gets a little break from his torment, like 1 week a year. Yeah. So the Vita of Judas, it's like a warning.
Yeah.
Don't be like Judas. It's the opposite of those stories about sinners who find redemption,
Right.
like Peter or Mary Magdalene.
Even people in regular stories, not religious ones.
Exactly, like Sir Gauther.
But there's that bit at the end of one of the manuscripts, a plea for mercy.
Oh, yeah.
So maybe there was still this idea that if you were truly good, you could be saved.
Maybe. Okay, so are you ready for something completely different?
Bring it on.
Let's talk about the Gospel of Barnabas.
Okay, so this is the one that's caused a lot of arguments, right?
Yeah.
Especially for Muslims, because some of them believe it's the true gospel, and they think it even predicts that Muhammad is coming.
Right. And this gospel, it basically goes against everything that Christianity is based on.
Yeah.
It says Jesus wasn't divine, that the real Messiah is still going to come, and that his name will be Muhammad.
Okay, wow.
And it says Jesus didn't die on the cross, he just went up to heaven.
Okay.
There's this claim that Irenaeus mentioned this gospel.
Oh,
But the paper actually explains that he was talking about something else, the Epistle of Barnabas, which is way older.
right.
And then there's that story about Barnabas's body being found with a gospel.
Yeah, I remember hearing about that.
It was supposedly during Emperor Zeno's time, but other people say the book they found was actually the Gospel of Matthew.
Oh, okay.
So there's a lot of debate about this Gospel of Barnabas.
Yeah, for sure.
Most scholars think it was written in the Middle Ages, maybe based on some older Gnostic texts. And then later, they think people added in stuff about Islam.
Okay, so not actually written by Barnabas then.
Probably not. And there are all these things in the text that just don't make sense for the time of Jesus.
Anachronisms, right.
Yeah, like it describes Lazarus' family as being these powerful lords. That's not how it worked back then under the Romans.
Right.
And there are even quotes from Dante in there.
No way.
Yeah, Dante Alighieri, the Italian poet.
Like from the Inferno.
Yeah.
But he lived way later. Right.
14th century.
Yeah.
And the Gospel of Barnabas, it also talks about 9 heavens, which is different from what the Quran says.
Okay, so this was definitely written much later than they claim.
Definitely. The main manuscripts we have, one's in Spanish, the other's in Italian.
Okay.
That one's in the Austrian National Library. And then there are these English translations that were done by the Rags, but even those have a weird history.
How so?
Like, later versions of the book sometimes take out the parts where the Rags themselves said they thought the gospel was fake.
Ah.
And they add in stuff trying to argue that it's real. And there are even places where they changed the text.
Wow.
And there have been attempts to link the author to the Barnabas from Acts.
Okay.
But there are a lot of problems with that.
Uh-huh.
Like, the Barnabas in Acts was really close with Paul at first.
Right.
And the gospel makes all these mistakes about history and geography, too.
Like what?
It says Pilate was governor at the wrong time. And it gets Daniel's age wrong, the prophet Daniel, you know. And it puts Nazareth on the coast, but it wasn't.
Oh, okay. So, yeah, not the most accurate text then.
No. But it does use stuff from all 4 of the canonical Gospels and from the Old Testament. But it's got its own take on Judas.
Oh, how so?
It's mostly based on John's Gospel.
Okay.
So in the Gospel of Barnabas, Judas is always last in the list of disciples, and they call him the traitor right from the start.
Okay. So still the bad guy.
Yeah. And they actually say that Iscariot might not even be his real last name.
Oh, interesting.
They think it might be more like a title.
Hmm.
And he's the treasurer for the group right from the start, but he doesn't get to hear all the special stuff that Jesus tells the other disciples.
Okay.
So even in this version, he's kind of an outsider. And that story about Mary anointing Jesus with the oil,
Yeah.
it's in there, but they make a big deal about Judas getting upset because of the cost.
Okay.
And they say it's because he figures out he could have gotten a tenth of the money if they'd sold it. So he thinks he could have gotten 30 pieces of silver. And that's why he decides to betray Jesus to get that same amount.
So it's a very direct link between greed and betrayal.
It is. But then it gets really wild. Judas goes to Gethsemane with the soldiers to arrest Jesus, right?
Yeah.
But instead of Jesus being arrested, these 4 archangels show up.
Ooh.
Michael, Gabriel, Raphael, and Uriel.
Wow.
And they take Jesus away.
What?
It's like divine intervention.
Okay.
And while this is happening, Judas, he suddenly starts to look exactly like Jesus.
What?
It's a miracle. So when the soldiers get there, they think Judas is Jesus and they arrest him.
No way, even though he's saying he's not Jesus.
Yeah.
Oh, wow.
So Judas ends up being crucified instead of Jesus. And the crazy thing is, he even says those words from the cross. God, why hast thou forsaken me?
The words Jesus is supposed to have said.
Exactly.
That's so ironic.
It really is. It's like he wanted Jesus to suffer, and now he's the one suffering. And this whole thing with the archangels and the switch, it really changes the meaning of the story. It's saying that Jesus wasn't actually crucified, that he was more like a prophet, a messenger like Elijah.
Okay, yeah.
And it denies the whole resurrection thing, which is kind of like the Gospel of Judas, although they have different reasons for that.
Right. Okay, so what happens next?
Well, the Gospel of Barnabas says that people stole Judas's body from the tomb.
Okay.
And then the rumors start going around that Jesus has risen from the dead.
But
Then Jesus comes back to his followers and tells them the truth. It was Judas who was crucified, not him. And he says he's going to come back again someday as a righteous king.
that's quite the story.
It is.
And it ties in with that whole question of, did someone else die on the cross instead of Jesus?
Yeah, some people think it might have been Simon of Cyrene,
Right.
or even Judas, Thomas, Didymus. But the Gospel of Barnabas is saying, no, it was Judas Iscariot.
It's all very interesting.
It is. And it kind of reflects what the Quran says about Jesus' death, too.
Oh.
It says, they thought they did, which makes it seem like there was some kind of trickery going on.
Right.
And some Muslims interpret that, meaning that Judas was part of the deception. And there are even some medieval European writers who talk about Judas being crucified instead of Jesus.
Really? Like who?
Like Sir John Mandeville. He was a traveler, wrote about all the places he'd been.
Okay.
But he was known for exaggerating things, and he probably got his information from some pretty obscure sources.
Right.
So even though the Gospel of Barnabas is important for some Muslims, it looks like it was written much later and borrows a lot from other Christian traditions. And then it adds this crazy twist where Judas ends up suffering the fate he planned for Jesus.
Yeah, it's pretty poetic, isn't it? Okay, so we've gone through a lot here. Canonical Gospels, apocryphal Gospels, the Vita of Judas, and now this Gospel of Barnabas.
We have. And when you look at it all, besides what's in the Gospels and Acts, there's really not much historical evidence about Judas.
Yeah, it's all pretty much based on those few texts. But the legends and interpretations, they're all over the place.
It's true. We've got the apocryphal Gospels. They were trying to show that Judas and Jesus had this rivalry from the very beginning.
Right.
Then you got the Gospel of Judas, which uses him to explain all these Gnostic ideas.
Which the early church definitely did not like.
Not one bit. And then there's the Vita of Judas, with this whole dramatic backstory about fate and destiny.
And the Gospel of Barnabas, where Judas gets his comeuppance, basically.
Yeah. But all this raises a big question.
What's that?
If Jesus knew Judas was going to betray him, if he even called him a devil,
Right.
why did he choose him as one of his disciples in the first place?
Yeah, it's kind of a mind bender, isn't it?
It is. And then you've got all these different ideas about what happened to Judas after he died. Dante puts him in the lowest level of hell. But then there are those stories about him getting a break for a week every year.
So some people thought he wasn't totally beyond hope. It's interesting that the Catholic Church has never actually said what they think happened to him.